The footage was grainy, black and white, time-stamped 2:47 a.m., but what it showed was unmistakable. Queen Camilla, standing in the private corridor of Buckingham Palace, her hand raised, striking King Charles across the face. The video lasted 8 seconds. 8 seconds that would shake the British monarchy to its core, and it came from the last person anyone expected. Sergeant Marcus Flynn had served in the Royal Guard for 12 years, decorated, trusted, silent, the kind of soldier who understood that what happened behind palace walls stayed behind palace walls until it didn't now. He sat in a small apartment in South London, watching his phone explode with messages, threats, pleas, offers. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, his safety uncertain, but the video was out there now, and there was no taking it back. If you're gripping your screen right now, hit that subscribe button. This story goes deeper than anyone imagined. You won't want to miss what happens next. Marcus's hands shook as he opened another news alert. Royal scandal, guard leaks alleged assault video. The headlines were everywhere. Every major outlet, every tabloid, every news channel across the globe. His phone rang. Unknown number. He didn't answer. It rang again. And again, and again. Finally, he picked up Sergeant Flynn. The voice was clipped. Official. This is Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Pemberton, Metropolitan Police. We need to speak with you immediately. Marcus closed his eyes. I know. The video you released contains... I know what it contains, Marcus interrupted. I was there. I saw it happen. Silence on the other end. Then, you understand the gravity of what you've done. I understand that I watched the Queen assault the King and was told to erase the evidence, Marcus said, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. I understand that covering up domestic violence makes me complicit, even if it's royal domestic violence. Miss Flynn, you violated the Official Secrets Act. You've breached royal security protocols. I've done what's right, Marcus said firmly, and I'll testify to that in court. Another pause. We're sending officers to your location for your protection and for questioning. I'll be here, Marcus said, and hung up. He looked at his phone one more time. The video had been viewed 40 million times in 6 hours. 40 million people had now seen what he'd seen that night, the truth he'd been ordered to bury 3 days earlier. Marcus had been on night duty. The graveyard shift, walking the corridors of Buckingham Palace, when most of the world slept. He'd heard raised voices. Coming from the king's private study, protocol said, ignore it. Keep walking. Royal arguments were none of his business, but something in the tone stopped him. Not just anger, fear. King Charles's voice, Camilla, please. You're not listening then, Queen Camilla's voice, sharp and venomous. I'm not listening. I'm not listening? You humiliated me in front of the entire cabinet. I disagreed with your assessment. That's not humiliation. You made me look like a fool. Marcus had stood frozen, torn between duty and concern. Palace corridors had security cameras. Everything was recorded, stored, monitored, later, if needed. Someone could review the footage, so he'd kept walking, but at the security station an hour later, he'd seen something that changed everything. Commander Gerald Hastings, head of palace security, reviewing footage at his desk. The timestamp showed the king's corridor. The time matched the argument Marcus had heard. Hastings had watched for a moment. Then, he'd deleted it. Permanently erased it from the system. Marcus had watched from across the room, saying nothing. But his blood had run cold. What had been on that footage that required immediate deletion? The next morning, Marcus had done something he'd never done before. Something that could end his career. He'd accessed the backup server. The one that stored copies of all security footage before it reached the main system. The one that wasn't supposed to exist but everyone knew did. And he'd found the footage. Hastings had deleted. What he saw made him physically sick. The argument in the corridor escalating. Charles trying to walk away. Camilla following, shouting. Then Charles turning back, trying to calm her, and Camilla, in a moment of pure rage, striking him across the face, hard enough that Charles stumbled backward, hard enough to leave a mark. Charles had stood there, hand to his cheek, staring at her in shock. Camilla had looked equally shocked. At herself? At what she'd done, then she'd turned and walked away. Charles had stood alone in the corridor for a long moment. Then he'd straightened his jacket and walked back into his study, and Marcus had watched Commander Hastings delete the only evidence it had ever happened. He'd copied the file to a secure drive, taken it home, spent 2 days wrestling with his conscience. The royal family had their secrets. Everyone knew that. Protecting those secrets was part of his job, but this wasn't a secret. This was a crime, and if it were any other husband and wife, the wife would be arrested, charged, prosecuted. So why should a crown make a difference? Now, sitting in his apartment waiting for police, Marcus knew his life would never be the same. But somewhere in Buckingham Palace, King Charles knew the truth was out, and Queen Camilla knew she'd be held accountable for the first time in history. A Queen of England was facing charges of assault, and the man who'd exposed it was a royal guard who chose injustice over loyalty. Within hours, Buckingham Palace released a statement. The royal family is aware of footage circulating on social media. We are cooperating fully with authorities and have no further comment at this time. 17 words that confirmed everything. The video was real. The assault had happened, and the monarchy was in crisis. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Sestera. Pemberton arrived at Marcus's apartment with 2 officers and a lawyer from the Crown Prosecution Service. They weren't there to arrest him. They were there to protect him. Mr. Flynn, Sarah said as they entered, you're in danger. Multiple credible threats have been made against your life in the past 3 hours. Marcus nodded slowly. He'd expected that. We're moving you to a secure location while we conduct our investigation, she continued. You'll be questioned extensively. Your testimony will be critical. I'll tell you everything, Marcus said, but I need something first. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You're not exactly in a position to negotiate. I need to know that King Charles is safe, Marcus said firmly. That he's being protected, not just from the public. From her, the officers exchanged glances. The king and queen have been separated, Sarah said carefully. They're in different residences under heavy security. That's not enough, Marcus insisted. You don't understand. This wasn't the first time. The room went silent. Sarah leaned forward. What do you mean? Marcus took a breath. I've served at Buckingham Palace for 12 years. I've seen things, heard things. We all have. But we're trained not to see, not to hear, not to speak what things? The CPS lawyer asked sharply. Arguments that ended with doors slamming. Charles with unexplained bruises he'd pass off as clumsiness. Camilla's temper that everyone just accepted as passionate. Staff walking on eggshells whenever she was in a mood. Marcus's voice grew harder. We normalized it, all of us. Because she's the queen and he's the king, and their marriage is supposed to be untouchable. Are you saying this was a pattern of abuse? Sarah asked. I'm saying I witnessed one assault, Marcus said carefully. But I suspect there were others, and if I'd spoken up sooner, maybe this one wouldn't have happened. The guilt in his voice was palpable. Sarah made notes quickly. We'll need names, dates, any other witnesses who might corroborate. They won't talk, Marcus interrupted. Not willingly. The royal guard doesn't break ranks. You did? Look where it got me, Marcus said bitterly. Homeless by tomorrow. Probably charged with treason. Death threats from monarchists who think I've betrayed the crown. You did the right thing, Sarah said firmly. Tell that to my career. My pension. My family who won't speak to me anymore. The CPS lawyer spoke up. Mr. Flynn, while you did violate the Official Secrets Act, there are public interest exceptions. If you were exposing a crime, that changes things legally. If. Marcus looked at him incredulously. You've seen the video? That's assault. Clear as day. The Crown has complicated legal protections, the lawyer said carefully. Prosecuting a queen is unprecedented. There are constitutional questions, immunities, diplomatic considerations. Marcus stood up, anger flashing across his face. So what you're saying is that she might walk. That being queen means she's above the law? I'm saying it's complicated. It's not complicated. Marcus's voice rose. If I hit my wife on camera, I'd be arrested. If you hit your wife, you'd be arrested. But she gets a pass because she wears a crown? No one is saying she gets a pass, Sarah interjected. But Mr. Flynn, you need to understand the reality. This case will face challenges no domestic violence case has ever faced. Political pressure, royal influence, constitutional precedent, and set a new precedent, Marcus said. Show the world that no one is above the law, not even royalty. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. That's exactly what we intend to do. Meanwhile, across London, King Charles sat in Clarence House. Surrounded by advisors, lawyers, and worried staff, he looked older than his years, tired, defeated. We need a statement from you, his press secretary urged. The public needs to hear your side. My side. Charles laughed hollowly. What side is there? The video speaks for itself, but context matters, his lawyer insisted. What led to the altercation? Was there provocation? Were you injured? Charles touched his cheek unconsciously. The bruise had faded, but the memory hadn't. I don't want to prosecute my wife, he said quietly. The room erupted in overlapping voices. Your Majesty? That's not your decision. The Crown Prosecution Service will proceed regardless. Public opinion demands ENOUGH. Charles's voice cut through the chaos. Silence fell. I don't want to prosecute my wife, he repeated slowly. But I won't stop them from doing so. If the law says she must face consequences, then she will face consequences. He looked around the room. Even if it destroys us both. His private secretary spoke carefully. Your Majesty, there's another concern. If this goes to trial, your entire marriage will be examined. Every private moment. Every argument. I know, Charles interrupted. I know what this means. But that guardsman risked everything to expose the truth. The least I can do is not hide from it. He stood and walked to the window overlooking the London streets. Crowds had gathered outside. Protesters, supporters, media, all waiting for the next chapter of this unprecedented scandal. Has anyone spoken to Camilla? Charles asked without turning around. Uncomfortable silence. She's refusing counsel, someone finally said, refusing to make a statement. Her legal team is threatening to resign. Charles closed his eyes. She's terrified. She should be, someone muttered. No, Charles said firmly, turning back. She's terrified of herself. Of what she's become? Of what she's capable of? His voice softened with pain. I've watched her spiral for months. The pressure, the criticism, the constant scrutiny. Something in her broke.
That doesn't excuse assault, Your Majesty. I know it doesn't, Charles agreed.
But it explains it. And if we're going to get through this, we need to understand the difference. The press secretary checked his phone. Sir, the Metropolitan Police have just announced they're formally charging Queen Camilla with assault. The arraignment is scheduled for next week.
Yeah.
Charles sat down heavily. Then it's really happening. Yes, sir. For the first time in British history, a sitting queen will stand trial for a criminal offense. Charles looked at the faces around him. Advisors, lawyers, friends, all wondering the same thing. Could the monarchy survive this? Could he, and somewhere in a safe house across London? Marcus Flynn wondered the same thing while watching the news. Coverage of the firestorm he'd unleashed. He'd wanted justice. But he was learning that justice, especially royal justice, came with a price no one could have predicted. The arraignment was set for Westminster Magistrates' Court Tuesday morning. 10 o'clock, the world would be watching. Queen Camilla arrived in an unmarked vehicle surrounded by security. No crown, no jewels. Just a simple navy suit and sunglasses that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in her face. The crowd outside was massive. Protesters held signs. No one above the law. Justice for Charles. Royal accountability now? But there were supporters too. Smaller in number but vocal. Stand by Camilla. Marriage is private. Free the Queen. Inside the courtroom, the air felt suffocating with tension. Marcus sat in the gallery, flanked by plainclothes officers. He'd been advised not to attend. Too dangerous, too public. But he needed to see this through. Needed to know his sacrifice meant something. The magistrate entered. Everyone rose. And then Queen Camilla was led to the defendant's box, for the first time in 300 years. A Queen of England stood accused of a crime in a public court. The charges were read. Assault by beating. Contrary to Section 39 of the Criminal Justice Act 1988, how do you plead? The magistrate asked. Camilla's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we request a closed hearing. The sensitive nature of this case denied, the magistrate said firmly. The law applies equally in open court. The defendant will enter a plea. Camilla stood slowly. Her voice was barely audible. Not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Journalists typing frantically. Spectators gasping. Security tensing. The magistrate gavelled for order. This case will proceed to Crown Court. Given the nature of the charges and the public interest, I'm denying bail modification. The defendant will remain under house arrest at an undisclosed location until trial.
Ow.
Your Honor, Camilla's lawyer protested. The defendant is the Queen Consort. She poses no flight risks, the defendant. The magistrate interrupted coldly, is accused of assaulting the King of England. Standard domestic violence protocols apply. House arrest remains in effect. It was a stunning moment. The magistrate had just treated the Queen exactly as they would treat any other defendant in a domestic violence case. No special privileges. No royal exception, just the law. As Camilla was led out, she glanced up at the gallery. Her eyes found Marcus. For a split second, their gazes locked. Marcus expected hatred, anger, blame instead. He saw something that shocked him. Gratitude. Then she was gone. And Marcus was left wondering if he'd imagined it. Outside the courthouse, the press descended on Marcus's like locusts. Cameras, microphones, shouted questions. Sergeant Flynn, do you regret releasing the video? Were you ordered to delete it? Is there more evidence we haven't seen? His police escort pushed through, getting him to the waiting vehicle. But one question cut through the noise. Do you think the king will testify against his own wife? That question haunted Marcus as they drove away, because the prosecution had already confirmed it. King Charles had been subpoenaed. He would have to take the stand, and he would have to tell the truth about his marriage under oath. Back at Clarence House, Charles received the news from his lawyer. He'll be called as the primary witness, the lawyer explained. The prosecution's case centers on your testimony and the video evidence. What do they want me to say? Charles asked quietly. The truth, Your Majesty? What happened that night? Whether there were previous incidents? The nature of your relationship? Charles stood and paced the room. You're asking me to testify against my wife in a criminal trial? Do you understand what that means? Not just for us, but for the institution. I understand it's unprecedented. It's devastating, Charles interrupted. The monarchy has survived wars, scandals, divorces, but this. A king testifying against a queen in open court? He shook his head. This could end us. With respect, sir, hiding the truth could end you faster. Charles stopped pacing. What do you mean? Public sentiment is shifting, the lawyer said carefully. Initially, people were shocked, outraged. But now, questions are emerging. Why did you cover it up? Why did palace security delete the footage? What else are you hiding? I didn't cover anything up. No, but your security did. On your behalf, rightly or wrongly, that makes you complicit in the eyes of many. The lawyer leaned forward. Your Majesty, the only way to restore trust is complete transparency. That means testifying. Honestly. Fully. Charles sank into his chair. She'll never forgive me. Perhaps not. But the country might. That evening, Charles did something he hadn't done since the incident. He called Camilla. She answered on the third ring. Charles. Her voice sounded hollow. How are you holding up? A bitter laugh. How do you think? I'm under house arrest, facing criminal charges. About to be tried in front of the entire world for hitting my husband? A pause. I'm spectacular. Camilla, don't. She interrupted. Don't try to comfort me. Don't try to fix this. You can't. I know. Silence stretched between them. Years of marriage. Years of partnership. Reduced to this? I'm going to testify, Charles said finally. More silence. Then, I know. They'll ask me questions. About us? About our marriage? About whether I've hit you before, Camilla finished. I know what they'll ask, Charles. Have I? Charles asked softly. Have there been other times I've forgotten? Excused? Normalized? The question hung heavy in the air. Yes, Camilla whispered. God help me, yes. Not often. Not severely. But yes. Charles closed his eyes. Why didn't I see it? Because you loved me. Because I loved you. Because we told ourselves it was just temper. Just passion, just... Her voice broke. Just not that bad. It was that bad, Camilla. I know, she sobbed. I know it was. And I hate myself for it. For hurting you. For making you feel you had to hide it. For becoming someone I never wanted to be. Charles felt tears on his own cheeks. I should have stopped it. Should have demanded help. For both of us, you're not responsible for my actions. No, Charles agreed. But I'm responsible for enabling them. For making excuses. For protecting the institution instead of protecting myself. Another long silence. What happens now? Camilla asked. You face trial? I testify. The truth comes out, and then, I don't know, Charles admitted. I honestly don't know. Do you still love me? The question came out small and broken. Charles took a shaky breath. I love who you were, who we were. Before the pressure and the scrutiny and the weight of all this crushed us both, he paused. But I don't know if that's enough anymore, Camilla cried quietly on the other end. I'm so sorry, Charles. For all of it, I know you are. Will you forgive me? Charles looked out at the London night, at the life they'd built, at everything that was crumbling. I'm trying, he said honestly. But right now, all I can do is tell the truth, and let justice decide the rest. They said goodbye, both knowing that the next time they saw each other would be in a courtroom, as accuser and accused, as king and defendant, as a marriage torn apart by its own secrets. Finally forced into the light by one guard's choice to do what was right instead of what was easy. And somewhere in that safe house, Marcus Flynn watched the news and wondered if he'd saved a king or destroyed a monarchy. The trial was 3 weeks away, and the whole world was holding its breath. The trial began on a gray Monday morning in February. The Crown Court was surrounded by barriers. Police. Media from 60 countries. Protesters and supporters in equal measure. Security was unprecedented. Inside, the courtroom felt smaller than expected. More intimate. More real. Queen Camilla sat at the defense table in a charcoal suit. Her hands folded. Her face composed. But Marcus, watching from the gallery, could see the tremor in her fingers. The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. This is a case about power and abuse, the prosecutor began. The defendant holds one of the most privileged positions in the world. Yet she used that position to assault her husband, the King of England. Knowing full well that royal protection would shield her from consequences, Camilla stared straight ahead, expressionless.
Ow.
Spuckering. a momentary loss of control. They will ask for sympathy, for understanding, for mercy. The prosecutor paused. But the law doesn't recognize royal exceptions to domestic violence. If this were any other couple, the defendant would have been arrested that night, charged immediately. There would be no debate. The prosecutor turned to face the jury. 12 ordinary citizens who would judge a queen. We will show you video evidence. We will present testimony from the victim himself, and we will prove beyond reasonable doubt that the defendant committed assault. The question isn't whether it happened. The video makes that clear. The question is whether we, as a society, will hold even royalty accountable for their actions. It was a powerful opening. The jury was riveted. The defense's opening was more subdued. My client has served this country with dignity for decades, Camilla's barrister began. She has been subjected to intense scrutiny, vicious public criticism, relentless pressure that would break most people. He gestured toward Camilla. Yes, she made a terrible mistake. In a moment of extreme emotional distress, she lashed out at her husband. But this was not a pattern of abuse. This was not calculated violence. This was a human being cracking under impossible strain. He paused, letting that sink in. The prosecution wants you to see a monster, an abuser who used her power to hurt without consequences. But I ask you to see what's really here. A woman who dedicated her life to public service, who made one catastrophic error in judgment, and who has already paid a devastating price. He looked at the jury earnestly. Justice doesn't require destroying someone who's already destroyed themselves with regret. The first witness was Commander Gerald Hastings, the man who'd deleted the original footage under oath. He confirmed he'd erased the video from the security system. Why? The prosecutor asked. Hastings shifted uncomfortably. It's standard protocol to protect the royal family's privacy in personal matters. Even when those personal matters involve criminal assault, I made a judgment call. Got a judgment call to obstruct justice. Objection, the defense called. Argumentative, sustained. But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. Palace security had actively covered up evidence of a crime. Next came Marcus Flynn. He walked to the witness stand on shaking legs. Every eye in the courtroom followed him. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Sergeant Flynn, the prosecutor began gently. Tell us what you witnessed on the night in question. Marcus took a breath. I was on patrol. Late shift. I heard arguing coming from the king's corridor. He described everything methodically. The voices. The decision to keep walking. Seeing Hastings delete the footage later. What made you access the backup server? Instinct, Marcus said. If the footage was deleted that quickly, that quietly, something serious had happened. I needed to know what. And when you saw the video? Marcus looked directly at Camilla. She met his eyes. I saw a crime, he said quietly. Clear and undeniable. And I knew that if I didn't preserve the evidence, no one would ever be held accountable. Why did you go public with it? Because I reported it through proper channels first, Marcus explained. I told my superiors. I submitted a formal complaint. I was told to forget what I'd seen, to destroy the copy I'd made, that it was in everyone's best interest to let it go. He paused. But it wasn't in the king's best interest. And it wasn't right. Defense cross-examined him aggressively. You violated the Official Secrets Act, didn't you, Sergeant Flynn? I exposed a crime. You betrayed your oath to protect the royal family. I protected the king by revealing the truth about someone hurting him. You've destroyed your career. Lost your position. Face possible charges yourself. Was that worth it for a few seconds of fame? Marcus's jaw tightened. I didn't do this for fame. I did it because watching someone get assaulted and doing nothing makes you complicit, even if that someone is the King of England. The defense had no response to that. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The prosecution calls His Majesty. King Charles III. The courtroom fell silent. Charles entered through a side door. He wore a simple dark suit. No crown, no regalia. Just a man about to testify against his wife. He took the oath in a steady voice, then sat in the witness box. The prosecutor approached carefully. Your Majesty, Thank you for your cooperation. I know this is difficult. Charles nodded slightly. On the night of the incident, what were you and the defendant arguing about? Charles took a breath. A policy disagreement. Camilla felt I'd undermined her opinion in a cabinet meeting. I explained, I simply had a different view. The disagreement escalated. How did it escalate? She became increasingly angry. Said I'd made her look foolish. I tried to calm her. Tried to walk away. But she followed me into the corridor.
I've been in the corridor.
Charles's voice was quiet, but clear. She was shouting. I turned to face her. Asked her to please lower her voice. Staff could hear. She said she didn't care who heard. That I was a coward. That I'd always been weak. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Then what happened? Charles looked at Camilla. Their eyes met across the courtroom. She struck me across the face. The words hung in the air like a sentence, with an open hand. Yes. Did it hurt? Physically. Yes. Emotionally. Charles's voice caught, devastatingly. The prosecutor paused respectfully. Had she struck you before? This was the question everyone had been waiting for. Charles closed his eyes briefly. Yes. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. How many times? I don't have an exact count. For perhaps 5 times over the past year. Did you report these incidents? No, why not? Charles looked at the prosecutor directly. Because I was ashamed. Because I told myself it wasn't that serious. Because I was the King of England, and admitting my wife was abusing me felt impossible. The word hung there. Abuse. He'd said it. Under oath. In public, what made this time different? The prosecutor asked gently. Because someone saw it, Charles said. Because I couldn't hide it anymore. Because the lie became impossible to maintain. He paused. And because Sergeant Flynn was braver than I was? The defense tried to salvage something in cross-examination. Your Majesty, you love your wife, don't you? I do. And you believe she loves you? I believe she does, yes. It's these incidents you described. Could they not be characterized as passionate arguments between 2 strong-willed people rather than abuse? Charles looked at the defense barrister for a long moment. If a husband hit his wife 4 or 5 times over a year, would you call that passionate argument? He asked quietly. The barrister had no answer. Exactly, Charles said. Love doesn't excuse violence. Position doesn't excuse violence. Nothing excuses it in that moment. A king taught his country something powerful, that admitting vulnerability doesn't make you weak, that seeking justice doesn't make you vindictive, that speaking truth, even when it destroys everything you've built, is the only path forward. The trial would continue for another week. More witnesses, more evidence, more painful revelations. But that moment, that answer, would be remembered long after the verdict came. The defense called only one witness, Queen Camilla herself. She took the stand on the trial's 8th day. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Every media outlet streamed it live. The world watched. Her barrister began gently. Your Majesty, tell us about the pressure of your position. Camilla's voice was steady but raw. From the moment I married Charles, I knew I'd face scrutiny. But I didn't understand the weight of it. The constant judgment. Every word analyzed. Every gesture criticized. I was compared to Diana endlessly, found lacking in every comparison. How did that affect you? It broke something inside me, she admitted. I tried to be perfect. Tried to prove I belonged, but nothing was ever enough. The press called me the other woman, the villain, the homewrecker. Her voice cracked. Even after 20 years, I was still the villain. Is that why you struck the king? No, Camilla said firmly. There is no why that excuses it. I struck my husband because I lost control. Because I let years of pressure turn me into someone I despise. She looked directly at Charles in the gallery. And I am profoundly, deeply sorry. The barrister continued. Do you believe you deserve punishment? Yes, Camilla said without hesitation. What I did was wrong. Criminally wrong. Morally wrong. I don't ask for mercy because of my title. I ask for understanding that I'm a human being who failed catastrophically. Will you commit violence again? Never, Camilla said, tears now streaming down her face. I would rather give up my title, my position, everything, than ever hurt Charles again. I've started therapy. Anger management. I'm doing the work to ensure this never happens again. Prosecution's cross-examination was brutal. You say you're sorry? But you've had multiple incidents, haven't you? Yes. 4 or 5 times, His Majesty testified. Over the course of a year. That's not one momentary lapse of control. That's a pattern. Camilla swallowed hard. You're right. It was a pattern. A pattern I didn't recognize until it was too late, because you thought your position protected you. Because I thought my husband wouldn't leave me, Camilla said quietly. Because I thought our love was strong enough to survive my failures. I was wrong. You had palace security delete evidence of your crime. I didn't order that. But I didn't stop it either. I let it happen because I was terrified of exactly this. Of facing consequences. Of the world knowing what I'd done. So you did think your position would protect you? Camilla looked at the prosecutor. I thought my shame would destroy me. I thought if anyone knew, I'd lose everything. So yes, I hid. I let others hide it for me. And that makes me complicit in the cover-up. It was a stunning admission. The defense looked horrified. But Camilla continued. I can't undo what I did. I can't erase the video. I can't take back the pain I caused. All I can do is face it, own it, and accept whatever punishment the court decides. The prosecution had one final question. Do you believe you're above the law because you're queen? No, Camilla said firmly. Being queen means I should be held to a higher standard, not a lower one. My title is a responsibility, not a shield. When Camilla stepped down, the courtroom was silent. She'd admitted everything, defended nothing, laid herself bare before the law and the world. The closing arguments began the next day. The prosecution was thorough. The evidence is clear. The defendant assaulted the king. She did so repeatedly. She allowed evidence to be destroyed. She hid behind her position until a brave guardsman exposed the truth. The prosecutor faced the jury. Your verdict will send a message. Either domestic violence is wrong regardless of who commits it, or titles and privilege place people above the law. Choose wisely. The defense made its final plea. My client has admitted her guilt. She's shown remorse. She's taking steps to ensure this never happens again. Punishment. Yes. But proportional punishment. She's lost her reputation. Her marriage is in ruins. Her legacy destroyed. How much more suffering serves justice? Then came the wait. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Marcus spent those days in the safe house, watching news coverage, reading commentary, wondering if he'd done the right thing. Charles spent them at Clarence's house alone. Preparing for whatever came next, Camilla spent them in her secured residence, writing letters to Charles, to her children, to the public, preparing for prison if it came to that. On the 3rd day, word came. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled again. Media, public officials. Everyone who'd followed this unprecedented case. Camilla stood as the jury filed in. None of them looked at her. That was never a good sign. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of assault by beating, how do you find the defendant? The forewoman stood. The silence was deafening. We find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Shouts, gasps. Reporters sprinting out to file stories. Security calling for order. Camilla stood perfectly still. She'd expected it. But hearing it was different. The judge gavelled for silence. The defendant will remain under house arrest pending sentencing. This court is adjourned. As Camilla was let out, she looked up at the gallery one last time. Charles sat there, tears streaming down his face. Not tears of triumph. Tears of grief. For their marriage. For the life they'd built. For everything that was ending. Camilla mouthed 2 words. I'm sorry. But Charles nodded. He knew she was, but sorry couldn't undo what had been done. 2 weeks later, Camilla returned for sentencing. The judge was thorough in his remarks. This court has heard evidence of a pattern of violence, of abuse of power, of attempts to conceal criminal behavior. Normally, such circumstances would warrant immediate custody. Camilla stood silently, bracing for prison. However, the judge continued. This court also acknowledges the defendant's genuine remorse, her completed admission of guilt, her cooperation with authorities, and her commitment to treatment. He paused, looking at Camilla directly. The sentence of this court is as follows: 12 months imprisonment, suspended for 2 years, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management and therapy, with progress reports submitted monthly, and a restraining order prohibiting contact with His Majesty, King Charles, unless he initiates such contact. Camilla closed her eyes. Not prison, but not freedom either. Furthermore, the judge added, this court recommends the defendant consider whether her continued role as queen consort serves the public interest. Given the nature of these convictions, it was a polite way of suggesting she abdicate. This court is adjourned. Camilla was led out to waiting cameras, flashing lights, shouted questions. She kept her head up, but her eyes were hollow. She'd been convicted, spared prison, but lost everything that mattered. That evening, she drafted a statement. Her press secretary advised against it. Her lawyers said it wasn't necessary, but Camilla released it anyway. I have been found guilty of assaulting my husband. The verdict is just. My actions were indefensible. I take full responsibility for the pain I've caused to Charles, to the institution of the monarchy, and to everyone who believed in me. Effective immediately. I am stepping back from all public duties while I undergo treatment and work to become someone worthy of the trust I betrayed. I will carry this shame for the rest of my life, but I will also work every day to ensure no one else makes my mistakes. To any victim of domestic violence, you deserve better. To any abuser, get help before you destroy what you love. Thank you to Sergeant Marcus Flynn for his courage in exposing the truth when I lacked the courage to admit it myself. The statement went viral. Some called it genuine. Others called it performance. But it was raw enough, honest enough, that most people believed she meant it. Charles read it alone in his study. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. Marcus Flynn. Your Majesty? Marcus sounded shocked. I wanted to thank you, Charles said simply. For saving my life? Sir, you did, Charles interrupted. You saved me from a situation I couldn't escape on my own. Yes, it's been painful, devastating, but it was necessary. And I'm grateful. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What happens now, sir? Charles looked out at the London night. Now we heal, all of us. The monarchy, my marriage, the country. We face what happened and we heal. And the Queen? I don't know, Charles admitted. That's up to her. In time, and whether forgiveness is even possible after this. They talked for a few more minutes. Two men from different worlds, connected by one moment of courage that changed everything. After hanging up, Charles sat alone with his thoughts. His wife was a convicted criminal. His marriage was shattered. His monarchy had been through its greatest scandal in modern history. But the truth was out. The lies were over. The healing could begin. And sometimes that's all you can ask for. 6 months after the verdict, Britain was still processing what had happened. The monarchy had survived. Barely. But it was forever changed. Charles continued his duties as king, more quietly now, more carefully, but also more authentically. He'd become an unexpected advocate for domestic violence victims, speaking openly about his experience in ways no royal ever had. Abuse doesn't discriminate, he told a charity gathering. It doesn't care about your title, your wealth, your gender. It finds the vulnerable places in relationships and exploits them. And silence only makes it worse. His approval ratings, surprisingly, had climbed. People respected his honesty, his vulnerability, his willingness to break the royal mold of silence and stoicism. Camilla had kept her word. She completed her community service at a women's shelter, working with domestic violence survivors. She attended therapy 3 times a week. She stayed out of the public eye except for her required check-ins with the court, and she hadn't seen Charles in person since the sentencing. The restraining order allowed him to initiate contact. He had until today. Camilla received the call from Charles's private secretary. His Majesty requests a meeting tomorrow afternoon at Clarence House. You're under no obligation to accept. Camilla's hand shook. Tell him yes. I'll be there. The next day she arrived at Clarence House. No press. No announcement. Just a private car and minimal security. Charles waited in his private sitting room. He stood when she entered. They looked at each other for a long moment. Both older, both worn by the past months. Hello, Charles, Camilla said quietly. Hello. They sat across from each other. An ocean of hurt between them. How are you? Charles asked. Trying to become someone I can live with? You? The same, I suppose. Silence settled. Not comfortable, but not hostile either. I read about your charity work, Camilla ventured. The domestic violence advocacy. You're making a real difference. It's the least I can do, Charles said. Turn our pain into something meaningful. Our pain, Camilla repeated. I caused that pain. You did, Charles agreed. But we both enabled it. I by staying silent. You by letting it continue. Camilla looked at him. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you leave me? After the first time? Or the second? Why did you stay? Charles considered the question carefully. Because I loved you. Because I thought love could fix it. Because I was ashamed to admit what was happening. And because I'm the king. Kings don't run from their problems. We endure them. It's not strength, Camilla said. That's martyrdom. I know that now. More silence. Heavy with memory. The therapy is helping, Camilla said finally. Understanding why I did it? The pressure. The anger I never processed. The feeling of never being enough. She looked at her hands. None of that excuses it. But understanding it helps prevent it from happening again. I'm glad you're getting help. Are you? Camilla looked at him directly. Glad. Or just relieved I'm someone else's problem now. Charles winced at the bitterness in her voice. Camilla, no, I'm sorry, she interrupted. That was unfair. You've been more than fair. More than I deserved. You're my wife, Charles said simply. Despite everything, you're still my wife. Am I? Camilla asked. Or am I just the convicted criminal you're married to? Both, Charles admitted. And I don't know what to do with that. Camilla nodded. She'd expected as much. I've been thinking about the future. What happens when my suspended sentence ends? What role, if any, I have in public life? Whether the title of Queen Consort means anything anymore? What have you decided? That it's not my decision alone, Camilla said. The people have made it clear I'm not welcome as queen. Not really. And I understand that. I've destroyed any right to that position. So you're abdicating? I'm accepting reality, Camilla corrected. I can keep the title technically, but I'll never perform royal duties again. Never represent the crown. Never stand beside you at state functions. She met his eyes. I've already taken everything from you. I won't take your dignity, too, by forcing you to defend my continued role. Charles felt something crack in his chest. You're giving up. I'm facing consequences, Camilla said. Real ones. Lasting ones. That's what accountability looks like, in us. Charles asked quietly. Our marriage? Camilla's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. I love you. I always have. But I also broke us beyond repair. And I don't know if love is enough to fix that. Neither do I, Charles admitted. They sat in that uncertainty for a long moment. Marcus Flynn came to see me, Camilla said suddenly. Last week? Charles looked up, surprised. Did he? Showed up at my community service. Said he needed to apologize for destroying my life. Camilla laughed bitterly. I told him he'd saved yours. And possibly mine too. What did he say? That he hoped we'd both find peace. That exposure of truth is painful, but necessary. She wiped her eyes. He's a good man. Braver than most. He is, Charles agreed. I asked him if he regretted it, Camilla continued. Releasing the video, knowing how much pain it caused. He said no, because pain with purpose is better than peace with lies. Charles nodded slowly. He's right, is he? Camilla looked at him searchingly. Because right now, all I feel is pain. I don't see the purpose yet. The purpose, Charles said carefully, is that other people saw what happened to us and got help. Relationships were saved because ours was exposed. Victims found courage because I found courage. Paused. That doesn't erase what you did, but it gives it meaning. Camilla absorbed that. I've received letters, hundreds of them, from abuse victims. From abusers who recognize themselves in my story, people getting help because of the trial, that matters. Does it make up for hurting you? No, Charles said honestly, but it makes it count for something. They talked for another hour. About therapy, about the future, about whether their marriage could survive this. They didn't reach any conclusions, but they reached something else, understanding that healing isn't linear, that forgiveness takes time, that some damage can't be fully repaired, but that the attempt still matters. As Camilla prepared to leave, Charles walked her to the door. Can I ask you something? He said, anything.
At night.
In the corridor. When you hit me, what did you feel? Camilla closed her eyes. Rage. At you. At myself. At everything. And then, immediately after, horror. At what I'd done. At who I'd become. She looked at him. Why do you ask? Because I need to know if you felt powerful in that moment. Or broken. Broken. Camilla said without hesitation. Completely broken. Charles nodded. That was the answer he'd needed to hear. Thank you for coming, he said. Thank you for inviting me. She paused at the threshold. Charles? Yes. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life making sure I become someone worthy of having been forgiven, even if you never do. Charles watched her go, back to her reduced life, her community service, her therapy, her uncertain future, and he felt something he hadn't expected. Hope, not for their marriage. That was still too uncertain, too damaged, but hope that people could change. That accountability could lead to growth, that even the most broken things could find new purpose. Marcus Flynn. Watching the news coverage of Camilla's quiet work at the domestic violence shelter, felt the same hope. His sacrifice had mattered. His courage had changed lives. Yes, he'd lost his career, his position, his privacy, but he'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that he'd chosen truth over comfort, justice over loyalty, right over easy, and in a world that often rewarded silence. That meant everything. The story of the leaked video became a landmark moment in British history. The first queen tried and convicted in a criminal court, the first king to testify against his spouse, the first royal to speak openly about domestic violence, but more importantly, it became a turning point for thousands of people suffering in silence. Domestic violence charities reported a surge in calls. Men, especially, finding courage to admit what was happening to them, seeking help, breaking silence. Because if a king could admit vulnerability, anyone could. Because if a queen could face consequences, everyone should. Because Marcus Flynn had shown that sometimes breaking the rules is the most loyal thing you can do. The video that started it all, 8 seconds of grainy footage, remained online. A permanent record. Some called for it to be taken down. To respect privacy? To let the past fade, but it stayed. A reminder. A warning. A promise that no one is above the law. No one is beyond accountability. No one is too powerful to face truth. Charles continued his reign with new purpose. Camilla continued her recovery with quiet determination. Marcus continued his life with hard-won peace, and the monarchy survived, changed, scarred, but stronger for having faced its darkest moment in the light, because that's what truth does. It hurts. It exposes. It destroys comfortable lies, but it also heals. It liberates. It builds something more honest in the ruins of what came before. And sometimes, that's exactly what the world needs, even when it comes from the last place. Anyone expected a security camera in a palace corridor, a guard who chose courage over career, and a king who chose truth over tradition. Together, they prove that change is possible. That accountability matters. That even crowns must bow to justice. And that, in the end, is a legacy worth fighting for.